I would have to say that my main influence during those years at Junior Academy and the portal to this world of classical and other kinds of music was Michael Lewin, Professor Lewin, who is still the head of guitar, and was able to engender a sense of calm. I wanted to take more risks and I wanted to try more than I could achieve. And what Michael was really great at achieving with this slightly headstrong teenager who never had enough time to practice was getting me to consider the steps that you would need to take to get to that goal. And he was doing that to engender a sense of security in performance, so that when you walk out on stage, you've got that bedrock of preparation. The other hugely important thing, which I carry to this day, was his feeling for sound and I'm trying to demonstrate that with my hands, but how that relates physically to what you do with your hands. He himself has the most beautiful sound. I wanted to add volume and power and excitement and all of those sorts of things that I didn't really have the technique to do. So what I learned was this perennial compromise between beauty of sound and freedom of expression.
So my first lessons with Jim Watson were at the Academy, and I remember coming into the front doors and thinking, God, where do I go from here? And somebody would show me up to the third floor, and there I would have these lessons with a great man. He was the golden boy of the trumpet in the early mid-70s. He was on all the great recordings. He had been principal trumpet of the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra just after he was a student here. And he was also the sort of main soloist in that period with the Philip Jones Brass Ensemble, which was the go-to. He was a great figure and a man of enormous, big heart, avuncular figure, a giant of a man in every sense, really. He had an extraordinary capacity for encouragement. And 20 years later, I was doing my own work as a trumpet player. I would go and play to Jim and talk to Jim about things I was doing, and he would hear my first edits of the recordings. He was always so helpful and instructive. And a bit of me always hopes that I can hear a bit of Jim in my playing. I don't think I can, probably, because he was on another level. But there was something about the line and the vocalizing of music and wanting to reach out and communicate to listeners, which you never lost with him, and he had it in his playing all the way through. He remained a great friend until he died very suddenly, aged only 59 in 2011. It was a huge shock.
One person I really loved working with was Sir Colin Davis. He'd been working with the Academy for many years before I started, and he would come every year to work with our symphony orchestra or sometimes on chamber music. And he would just drive himself in his old Volvo, and there were no airs and graces. He was just such a wonderful, warm person, and we did complete Sibelius symphonies, complete Beethoven symphonies. My first BBC prom in 2006 was a collaboration with Juilliard School at Symphony Orchestra, half and half, Juilliard and Academy with Sir Colin, live on television. Vaughan Williams and Berlioz, and just an amazing experience. He never once took a fee, such a hugely generous man, but he loved whiskey. So for every time he came, I would have the fun of going out and choosing a bottle of single malt. I knew nothing about whiskey, but I got to know what was good and what was not so good. And then you would have to drink it with him after the concert.
My mother was a singer, my grandfather was a singer. But I hadn't really thought of taking singing all that seriously when I came to the Academy. I was in a sight singing class, which I think was part of the course, which was the tutor, which was a distinguished contralto, Marjorie Thomas. And she said, well, have you thought of having your voice properly trained? She duly had a word with Henry Cummings, and later that day, there was a postcard written in very succinct, almost Edwardian style. Please see me And I went in and he said, "Oh, yes, what are you going to sing?" I sang these two pieces and I stood in the bend of the piano and I sang. He didn't say anything and I stood there. Is that it? Shall I go? Do I get a message? And he eventually looked at me and said, "Well, at least you look like a singer. We'll begin tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So Monday morning, 9 a.m., I was being asked about my thoughts. Saw him on Tuesday morning and I began with him on Wednesday morning. And thereafter, he saw me 3 times a week. He became like a father to me. When he retired, he left me his library. And then when his widow, Nora, who was Nora Newby, she taught accompaniment here, when she died, that piano came to me as well.
If it hadn't have been for John Wallace, who heard me at an audition and said, "I'll give you a go." I was 26 at the time. It was quite rare to take on 26-year-olds to a programme that was basically for 18-year-olds. I'd been turned down elsewhere, later finding out due to age, and he took me on. During my 4 years, he was a leader of inventiveness. It was never dull. There were concerts of just brilliance. We did a brass concert of music that had been found by a Swedish fire brigade band. And there were things like that were just fun to do.
I was an incredibly illustrious company. And when I look back on those people and how they succeeded, there was Elton John, who sat at the back, Reg Dwight, who was very quiet at the time. Elton actually left to join Dick James Music as a publishing company as an assistant in 1969, when I was booked to go to Trident Studios just off Dean Street to do a recording. Didn't know what it was, turned up there, and it was my old friend Paul Buckmaster, who was the cellist in the Junior Saturday Morning Academy, who was a great friend of Elton's and mine, and he'd done these arrangements for an album that was going to be called Elton John. That was his first big album, and we did a lot of solos on that. He'd written me a lot of solos, and then we did a live TV show, which you can still find on YouTube, of all those numbers. And I think we did a festival hall concert, and this became quite an iconic album. We did this song called Your Song on that album, which became very famous. A few years back, Giles Martin, George Martin's son, was the producer of Rocket Man, and he asked me whether I'd like to do the harp part on Your Song, which was going to be a feature in the film. And then I found out that I was the only member of the original band that actually redid the track 50 years later.